And welcome back. Well, if you happen to be watching these videos in series, to recap the previous video, we got our transmission cooler lines installed on the side of our transmission. We're just left with the connection points for our stub piece, which I talked about in yesterday's video. We're going to do, this will be one of the items done today. But also in the previous video, we did our air conditioning lines. We reattached our AC lines into our new expansion valve that we also did in the previous video. We got our procharger vacuum / boost manifold port or monitoring port, and it does have one outlet here that will eventually make it to their anti-surge valve, and we're using one of the ports in the bottom for a Banks pressure sensor that will be used for monitoring boost. We also did the wiring between the 4-channel analog monitor, and it's now attached to the iDash internal to the cab, as well as we have both the Banks sensors for the fuel and the boost plugged into our analog monitor. We have our other 2 channels over there off to the side, which will be used to monitor transmission temperature and differential temperature at a later point. And then we also put our power steering hoses in, waiting to be reattached to our power steering cooler. So we got, and our dry belts went in as well. We got our accessory dry belt in, we got that attached, and we got our main supercharger belt attached. So with that being said, what we're going to do first in this video is just get our stub lines connected, so that way they're ready to go into the new transmission intercooler. And you can see here we've got our rad support back out after being slightly cleaned up. And this is also, it's kind of one assembly. It's a rad support, but it's also the whole front support that eventually supports the headlights. It'll also support not only the radiator, but the condenser and so on and so forth. So we're kind of to the point we need to start getting these pieces in before we can start doing the duct work for the intercooler and the piping that comes with the procharger, because a lot of it runs in and out or through this support. So we kind of need it to be in place, and to an extent, potentially the air conditioner, I'm sorry, not the air conditioner, but the radiator, as well as the condenser, so that way they're in place and we're routing the piping correctly. We may try to do the piping without the rad and without the condenser, and we'll see if we can kind of get them in there after the fact, but I don't know. I'll have to do a little bit of thinking about it. We may just set the radiator and the new condenser in there. Yeah, I think we might do that. I think we might put the radiator and the condenser in just to get them installed and done, and that way they're there when we do our inner duct. Because I don't want to put the inner duct in and then run into a fitment or a fight issue trying to get the radiator and the condenser in later. So yeah, let's do that. Either way, first thing we're going to be taking care of is that let's go ahead and get these transmission cooling lines, like this little stub piece installed. Let me get you on tripod and zoomed in. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So got you zoomed in. I'm just going to take the protective covers off of our lines here. And you'll see that they have a very similar connection point to what the transmission uses. I'm also going to remove the little protective neoprene sleeves that have just been zip tied on. One moment. So depending on how long this video goes, to get the rad support, radiator, condenser, and all that back in and hooked up, we may get to the intercooling duct work or we may not. That may end up in its own video. Trying to keep them to about an hour to an hour and a half at most. I haven't received too many complaints about the length of video, so I'm hoping an hour to an hour and a half is still acceptable. There we go. And these little stub shafts, again, they use the same clips and the same setup the transmission did. Just these little C-clip kind of looking pieces. They kind of look like, I don't know, mushrooms in a way, I guess. Or the top of a mushroom. Okay, so we want, looks like this. Yeah, there's no. Oh, okay, I did not see that. Let's see. Is it actually oh, it contains one. Oh, that was nice of them. Let me show you that. It actually has new C-clips in it. So when I pushed that first one in, I don't know if you heard it lock, but we don't have to reuse the old ones. It was kind of nice. So apparently this line set comes with new ones. So all we have to do is just take the old one, get it lined up, push it in. You just heard it click. They're now locked in. All we have to do now is just put our caps on. Okay, so that was kind of nice of a factory line set that came pre-clipped. So we got a couple spare of these. Okay, let me get you backed up here. Okay, let me get you in a slightly different, let me get unzoomed and slightly in a different position. And we're going to see about laying this rad support in place and potentially starting to get it bolted up. So 1 minute. And welcome back. So I've got you zoomed out and back a little bit ways. And I'm just kind of eyeballing things and going over anything else that we can potentially take care of before we put this rad support in place and kind of start blocking our access to items. And I don't see anything else that we could potentially do and save ourselves some grief. So I think we're good to put this rad support in place. Let's see. So I got a bag of hardware here titled, oh, that's Rad Shroud and Radiator, so we don't want that. Looks like it's going to be a part of this big old bag of hardware here, which contains everything we took off to remove the power steering cooler and the front rad support. So we got quite a bit of hardware to put back in to get this thing to be remounted. And then we'll also have to be mindful of our wiring harness at the same time. But what we can do is, let me push this, see if I can push this transmission line set, yeah, out of the way for the time being, just off to the side so we're not fighting it. Get you turned a bit more. Let me block your view at times of doing this. I apologize. And let's get our wiring harness here. More into the center, kind of out of our way. good release cable. We need to unfree. Let's get some wiring harnesses over here on the... Just pulling some wiring harnesses out over here on the driver's side for the headlight assembly out of the way. Getting them where they need to line up. And let me get you out of the holder here. Is that going to stay? Yes. Okay. So all I'm doing now is getting the radiator support, these plastic pins, lined up into the holes that you see. And we should, it looks like it goes in, okay, so it goes into the top, sorry, it goes into the top hole of those. This side's in, this side's in, that's in, and that's in. Okay. All we need now is a bunch of bolts. So we should have 2 bolts on the top. And it looks like 3 bolts on the bottom, 2 bolts on the top. And we have some additional hardware, if you remember, that was inside of here on the frame right there that comes through, and we'll bolt that in place. Once we have all that hardware in here, that should be enough to hold it, and then we can continue further. Let's get you back on your tripod. Okay, there you are. Okay, so let me do that. Let me get some bolts in this to hold it, and then I'll bring it back. But again, it looks like we got 4 across the top and 6 across the bottom and the corners that are the main support bolts for this. I'll get those in and bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just to show you the bolts we're dealing with here. So the 4 across the top are these longer ones with the nice long shank on them. And it looks like the 6 across the bottom and be slightly smaller, and they're just completely threaded all the way through. So I'm going to get these in and bring you back. One moment. So we have our bolts tight into our support. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of go through it and get the wiring harness re-clipped in to where it needs to be, do things like re-bolt our airbag sensors, which there are 2 of them, and the airbag sensors bolted to the bottom of this radiator shroud. But to show you where they kind of hide, this is the lower radiator support, and that little cubby hole right underneath here is where they live, one on each side. So we're doing items like that and just getting the wiring harness reoriented where it needs to go, and where we run across issues like this where the clips broke upon removal, and we're just using our bag of Christmas tree zip ties here to kind of replace the broken fasteners when we find them, and obviously if we've got an appropriate fastener to replace it with. And you can see our power steering hoses will match up, so we'll get our power steering cooler in here at some point and bolt that back to the front of our radiator support. So yeah, that's what we're going to do next. We're just going to work on, again, rerouting this wiring harness, putting it back where it belongs. It's pretty much a similar process of just like putting wiring harness back on an engine, especially these older harnesses. They kind of have a memory. They kind of want to tell you where they are most comfortable being laid out onto. So you can kind of see that those lay there, and you can use that as a guide to determine what went where. Like that's a tube for water, which means it's going to be for the windshield washer reservoir that would normally sit here. There's a air temperature connection that sits there, and we're also using our labels, because we labeled most of these upon removal if it was something that wasn't obviously straightforward as to where it went. And this is a back connection. That windshield washer reservoir actually has 2 connections on it. It has one for the drive motor, which is that one there, goes down, connects to the pump, It also has one that comes out the back of it, which is the sensor for the low windshield washer fluid. So it's going to be like I said, it's going to be the same process of just going through here, following this. This harness actually comes up and follows the top of the rail behind it, because there is a comment about this relay in the procharger manual. When we get to that step, there's something specific we have to do to this as far as moving it or something along that nature. We'll cover that more when we get there. But this again, this harness will just, that's where your relay would normally mount. It's kind of right there in the center, and the harness would follow suit. So going to give me more of that. I'll bring you back once we get the harness situated, and before we go on to the next piece. Before we put anything else in here beyond the wiring, I did think of one other item that we can do, because it would be easy. Is we're going to go ahead and install our oil filter, and I'll bring you along for that. I'm going to show you what we're going to use for braking oil. It'd be much easier to install that filter now, while we can still kind of guide underneath and around things to do it. So let me get this wiring harness situated. I'll bring you back, show you when it's done, and one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we're just in the process of, like we spoke about, just getting the wire loom relayed in. And we had a section here that was just, due to heat, age, had gotten just really brittle, and you could touch it. Here's a section of it here, and it would just literally just crumble. So we went ahead, since we had some extra loom, and just used some fabric tape, as you can see, put a patch job in. And whenever you're taking a harness apart, if you got the time and you got a labeler, I'd highly suggest labeling connections, just as to kind of give you a reminder where they go. And even if you're not sure, you can see on this one we labeled it B. On this side of the harness, we labeled it A, as a reminder that this one stayed with the vehicle, this one came out with the harness, but it lets us know that this connector goes into that connector. And if we follow it back, it looks like it joins into another section of harness back there. So it's either the light power for the hood light, or it goes into something else. But without being sure exactly what it was, and with this being the only B, and this being the only A in close proximity, again, just kind of a little breadcrumb for us to follow. Inevitably, it will happen, just as it happened here. You can see that we've had to loosen the bolts up, mounting bolts up on this side for our radiator support. Why? Because we need to push our connectors through for our headlight assembly, which goes between the plastic piece on this radiator and the body frame. And if you tighten the bolts up, there isn't enough slack to get the head of the connectors through. So we're just in the process of loosening up so we can get some slack and get those pushed through. But that's where it sits right now. We're going to continue to go through and get our harness kind of down in a position. I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So as we were talking about earlier, since we still have good access without having radiators and stuff in here, and we can kind of crouch down in here, we're going to go ahead and install our oil filter while we're here. And I asked the machine shop when we picked the short block up, you know, what their recommendations were, what they would normally use for like a engine braking oil. And they gave me their recipe, which was, they didn't say, I couldn't say it, tell anybody, but they use standard engine oil. They'll add a zinc additive package, and then they'll put a Lucas oil treatment in there as well, and that's what they'll use for break-in, and they said it works really well for them. Well, I was doing some internet searching, and I found this 5W20 Lucas engine braking oil, high zinc content, which is exactly what we're looking for. And also, it's in the weight of the oil that the vehicle takes, which in this case, pretty much every 1500 5.7 Hemi, I think, is 5W20. So we're going to give this a shot. And we're going to use a Wix XP filter. Just my preference. I need to get a date written on here. I'll do that here in a bit. But what I'm going to do, and I'm not looking to, spark a debate in the comments or anything, but I am going to pre-fill this filter. And the reasoning for that, at least in this case, is, remember, this engine is mostly dry as far as its lubrication system, other than the assembly lube and that coats the internals at this point. So we and I want this engine to prime its oil system as fast as possible. So if part of that is that the pump has to pick the oil up, get it into the filter, get it out of the filter, and then into the engine, well, if we pre-fill this as much as we can, then at least that little piece of it's done, and it doesn't have to spend those few X number of milliseconds or a second or two filling this up first. So that's my logic behind it, and I'm just going to write in today's date and the words break-in so that we know that this is our break-in filter. And like I said, this will be run for about 500 miles, and then we'll change both the engine oil as well as the supercharger oil. And I thought it would also be interesting. I'll look into doing this as well. I've seen a lot of other channels, and I think it's Blackstone Labs that puts it out, but they give you a little oil sample kit. I figured we would do that as well. So once it comes time due for the 500-mile service, we'll get a sample of the oil out. We'll send it off to the oil sample lab, and we'll see what they've got to say about it. So with that being said, I'm just going to get this oil filter installed, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. You can see we got a filled oil filter installed, or at least as much oil as we could get it to take. I put mine on hand tight, to each their own. I usually just spin it till the gasket makes contact, and we did pre-lube the gasket, by the way. I usually spin it until the gasket makes contact with the surface, mark it with a Sharpie, and then spin it about 1/4 to 3/4 of a turn past that, just by hand. And I find that generally is more than enough to keep them secured in place. So we got all of our radiator support bolts in, to include the ones that hide inside the headlight assemblies there on the far sides, one each on driver and passenger. We went ahead and got our power steering cooler reinstalled back on the front of our support. It's just 2 bolts that are fed through rubber isolators to keep anything from rubbing. I looked at this hose a bit more, and this clamp we were talking about in the previous video is about halfway down, so it doesn't really matter which direction you put just hose on. This clamp kind of ends up in the same spot. Now, I looked it up in the book as far as removal and installation of the low pressure lines, and that looks like that is supposed to be there to meet up with what they call the lower fan shroud, and I guess just kind of push in place on a stud or something to help support it. Now remember, we're not going back in with the original fan shroud on here because we're changing that out. We're leaving the mechanical fan off, if you remember, removing the small electric condenser fan that was in there and putting in the full size electric fan out of a V6. So the fan shroud is not going to be the same. So again, I'll leave this in there for the time being. And if we don't find anything to attach this to, I'll probably just come in here and kind of just snip off this unused piece of tie wrap here, at least for the time being. For the time being, I'll leave it there and we'll trim it up later, I guess is what I'm saying. So we should be able to now just take our hoses and line them up. And it looks pretty straight on as far as our cooler. It's just a pass-through cooler. It's just literally one loop through, so it shouldn't matter what side you put the hoses on, other than, they'll kind of tell you, if you do it that way, they'll be straight on, 1 for 1. If you do it that way, they'll cross, which is probably not ideal. But let's see. There we go. There's one. And it looks like to be, it looks to be a little bit long. You can kind of see it putting a little bit of a bow in the hose. And now that I'm looking at this, I think what I may do is come on this side of the high pressure line for that one, just so it looks a little bit better. One moment. Let's do this. Let's come alongside of this. And now when we put this one on here, yeah, you can see we're now on that side of the line. Yeah, not a bit. Looks a little bit better that way. I'm not going to trim this hose because it doesn't say to trim it. I mean, I don't mind a little bit of rise in it, and plus it'll give it some, you know, room to flex and wiggle and move, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's get the second one on. There we go. Okay. Yep. Second one's a little bit more of a whoop, nice smooth loop through. All we gotta do is put our clamps on. Okay, let's just make sure that's that way. Make sure it's out of the way. Yeah, we got plenty of distance between here and our belt, so we should be good there. Okay, so all I'm gonna do is grab a pair of pliers, move our clamps down, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So as you can see, hoses are attached. We're good there. So we've got radiator support in at this point. We've got our power steering cooler. We've got our lines attached to our power steering cooler, and we went ahead and installed the oil filter while it's still nice and easily accessible. AKA no bumper, no radiators, no condensers, nothing else in our way. We've got our wiring harness pretty much squared away onto our radiator support. We left the horns off, and we left the bracket for the relay disconnected because per the procharger book, they had you remove the horns and they had you remove the bracket off of this relay. So chances are they're going to have a relocation for this in a bit. So we're going to leave those off. We're going to leave the horn, we're going to leave the relay off, and we're going to leave the hood latch off for the time being until we get to... and it'll probably be one of the last things we do. We'll put the hood latch on. So we got our headlight wiring fixed on this side over here. Again, we had to unfortunately loosen up this side of it and pull it out a bit to get that through, but it is through now. That is all secure. We made the one electrical connection we spoke to about earlier here. So I think the next thing that we could go get would be the radiator and the condenser, and we could see about getting both of those in here and mounted. Once that's in place, windshield washer bottle can also go back in because that doesn't need to move. That'll be this connector here and this connector back here. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's get radiator, let's get the condenser, let's get them in. Let's get them plumbed to include upper and lower radiator hoses. That way, once we have all of this attached over here, then we'll be in a pretty good spot to then start following Procharger's book as far as getting the inner ducting in. So let me go grab some parts. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of getting the radiator prepped here, and just transferring some rubber isolator pieces off the old radiator onto the new one. The new one comes with new hardware already pre-installed. I did check, it does fit the factory bolts. Now we're using CSF. We've used them before in previous builds and the radiator's been fine. We're also going to be using a condenser for the first time from them. And I'll tell you, man, you can tell it was built to a price point. I hate to say that, but, you know, it was. This looks nothing like their picture. In their picture, it looks like the OEM one, where the manifold for the AC connections is an actual manifold. It looks to be a separate piece. Matter of fact, I took this off the factory one, thinking that we would need it. That's what it looks like for a factory piece, and it's the manifold that attaches to the condenser, and then you attach your lines to this piece here. But it looks like they've kind of found a way to save a little bit of money, and you can see that's now welded in. It's now a permanent part of it, which maybe it's a way to help avoid leaks, but I mean, I'm going to try it. I'm going to use it. I've got my apprehensions about it. unfortunately, but I did check. It does have a model number sticker on it. It is the model number of the one we ordered, but I'll tell you that if you look up a model number 10702 by CSF, and it looks nothing like this. It looks like, I guess, maybe an older design where, again, it was black in color, not aluminum. This one's aluminum, and this was actually again, a separate piece, much like this one was. Anyway, so I'm gonna get the radiator prepped and get the condenser prepped, and we'll get them in here. So just give me one moment. And welcome back. So we're going to see if we can get the radiator lowered in here first. And of course the condenser is going to sit in front of it, but I think if we can get the radiator in here first, that'll help us support and hold the condenser. The condenser just slides into a couple of tabs that are on the side of the radiator. Okay. Of course, we'll leave it unbolted and just let it lean forward. And what's going to happen is that you've got a couple of tabs. You got a tab here, and another tab at the bottom that the condenser will just slide into. And then it's got a couple of bolt holes here and here on the actual radiator that secure it. So now what we can do is get the condenser in here, and then the fun part will be just getting all the transmission lines and everything to line back up so we can get it to bolt. We'll find out how straight their little fixed AC lines are as to how well they'll mate up with these refrigerant lines. Like I said, if it's bent out of shape or isn't going to work, I'm going to have to order something different. But this condenser, also, at least in this configuration, is also the transmission cooler. Just get a relay pack out of the way. Let's see what you can see. You should be able to see most of this. This down. Switch hands here. And I'm just going to pull the existing transmission lines out of the way here, just to give me some space to back this thing up. So that's one tab in, that's the other tab in. So the tabs are in. And then what it will do is screw to the front, which I may put the fasteners in that just to help hold that condenser in place. Let me show you what I'm doing with here. So that tab and that tab. Let me get that hardware, which I should have in this baggie here. Yes. It's getting good reviews on Rock Auto when I ordered it, which is why I ordered it. They seriously need to update their picture, because the picture Rock Auto uses, and of course everybody uses, shows a drastically different condenser design. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Let me get you stable so I can get my other hand in here. There we go. Not quite centered, but you can kind of see what I'm doing. Hold on. The reason why those aren't fitting, it's got nothing to do with that. I've got the wrong bolts in my hand. That's why they're not lining up. There's a skinnier set and there's a slightly shorter and beefier set, and the beefier set is the ones that thread into this. Okay. So just got to pick up on the condenser slightly to get this bolt to line up. Hold on. Okay, let me get you stable. I'm gonna have to finagle with this. Looks like it's gonna need a little bit of persuasion. Okay, let me do this. Let me get you, instead of fidgeting with this while you watch me fidget, let me pause you and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got these two bolts in. It's not the world's perfect alignment on these brackets they've got on this condenser, but we got it to work. What I'm doing now, I did have to take this manifold and slightly kind of tweak it out a little bit, just being careful I didn't break anything in order to get it, because it has a mounting screw that goes through this manifold and screws into a support on the radiator. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that mounting point now, just so that it's secure and done. Let's see if I can get you looped around here and stable enough. There we go. I got you pretty close. I have to admit, I'm not thrilled with this this condenser. I mean, I get it. Now would be the perfect opportunity to order a different one, but I don't know. I may draw a vacuum on the AC system and just see if it'll hold it. Like I said, it looks like it'll work. It's just, you can just tell it's just it's not made with the utmost quality in mind. I don't know. I don't want to speak bad about it, but yeah, that's not gonna. I'll show you this. You can see what it's doing. This manifold they have on here, since this thing is fixed, I had to bend it out just to get it to meet the bolt, and you can see the manifold won't clear the plastic tab in the radiator, so it'll set flush so that you can put the darn bolt in it. The only way to do it would be to kick it out. Yeah, I have to kick it out a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna go look something up online real quick, but I'm gonna continue to fidget with this a bit, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, you can see the condenser's out. We've made the decision. We've ordered a new condenser, a actual Denso unit. They're OEM from Mopar, so it should be pretty much a spot-on alignment. I don't know if the condenser that I got from CSF, sorry, I have to say that slow. I keep transposing it. Um, was just a fluke or an older design. Don't know. But I didn't like the fact that I had to bend the manifold for the AC lines to get it to line up. It didn't quite line up with the mounting points in the radiator to begin with. Like I said, I don't know. But as you can see, I've used their radiators before, and their radiators have been fine. Absolutely no, so far, no issue with them. So anyway, although all it was just an AC condenser, that condenser also doubles as the transmission cooler. So with that being said, and me not feeling right about putting it in this vehicle, considering all the work we've got wrapped up in this motor, I made the call. And again, we're just going to go with a different unit. Again, I'm not trying to bash them, not trying to say anything wrong, but that maybe it's slip quality control. I don't know. But anyway, with that said, and that tirade over, we're going to proceed forward with the radiator we have. No issues with that one. If this video is long enough, I'll cut it at this point because it'll be moments for you, but it's, again, a couple of days before I can get that in. I really don't want to run the intercool piping without the radiator and the condenser being installed correctly, because I don't want us to inadvertently angle a pipe thinking that we have space and clearance somewhere, and then we find out once we go to install everything as far as the radiator and the condenser that we run into an issue. So I'm going to look at this once I get all the files downloaded, and if it's long enough, I'll release this one as a video, and then when we come back, we'll pick it up with the radiator install, the condenser install, and the intercool piping at that point. If it looks relatively short when I get all this downloaded, then the next bit of the clip that you will see is us continuing with the install of these two items and then getting to the intercool piping. So with that being said, I'm going to give an outro here. That may be a bit weird if the video does continue. Matter of fact, let me do this. Let me cut the video at this point, and then you'll either hear the outro from me, or you'll hear and see us continue. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, this is the outro if we end up cutting our install a bit short. So to kind of recap what we've done, we didn't like the condenser that came in for various reasons, so we've ordered a replacement. Now, it'll be a few days before that gets here. Moments for you, but a few days for me. We got the radiator support bolted back in at this point. We got our wiring harness reran. So no issues there. We went ahead and installed our power steering cooler and got its lines reconnected, and we got our stub lines for our transmission cooler lines attached, so they're just sitting here ready to plug into that condenser once we receive it. And we kind of got the radiator just sitting in here on some rubber mounts for the time being, again, until we get the condenser that needs to slide in front of it. And we got the oil filter primed and installed, so that is now taken care of as well. So as you can see, we're taking shape. We have a front end back on this truck again. Once we can get radiator, condenser, and intercool piping installed, then we'll be able to hopefully put the front bumper and everything on at that point. So with that being said, if this is the outro ending this one, then when we come back in the next video, again, we'll pick it up with the radiator, condenser, and intercool piping install. So if you have subscribed, I thank you immensely. If you have not, please consider doing so. We have recently broken the 2,000 subscriber mark, and I thank each and every one of you for that. With that being said, I will thank you all again, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.